Hi, hello there. Russ Gosselin here with another chapter on my Tools of the Hobby series for basic modeling skills for new model builders or people who are coming back from the hobby. You know, maybe they've been busy with their careers or family or other things, but they've decided to come back because hobbies are fun. Hobbies are great ways to get away from the ordinariness, the things we got to do. You know, it's a little place where you find a little joy in solitude or in community. So whatever your hobby is, I support it, whether it be music, arts and crafts, needlework. But my hobby is model building, and we're going to talk about glues today. So this was a book that I wanted to share with you all. It's an old book. You know me, I like my old things. So this is the Model Maker's Handbook, and it was published in 1981 by Albert Jackson and David Day. It's not just for model building, it's for model railroading, RC, boats and cars, and all sorts of stuff. But there's a huge section on model building, and it's got a lot of basic things, and I really like it. One of the things I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but maybe I'll take a picture and put it at the end of the video. But it's got this great chart about different bonds and glues for different materials that we as model builders use all the time. And it's very helpful. So if if you can't see it, I apologize, and what I'll try to do is get a picture of it and slap it in later. Okay, so enough of the books. Okay, glues. I remember gluing back in 1986. Anybody that was model building back in the 70s and 60s and stuff, you know, what was the glue? It was like that tube glue. Over here in the States, we had Testors glues, like a metal, almost like a little toothpaste thing. And I remember it had like I think it had a white cap, and it was like orange Testors cement. And the notorious thing about this glue was that when you pulled away from the model piece, like you had this like spider web of hair, and it was such a pain because you're building this thing and you get like all this hair kind of filament floating around. Then your finished model always had some bits and goobs of this hair, which was annoying. I'm sure it probably wasn't too good to breathe in either, working in the basement, but I'm still alive. I appear to be pretty healthy, so I'm glad the tube glue is gone. So what do we have now back in the 21st century? All kinds of stuff. But before we get into it, I just want to say that you know, for all model builders, whether you're new or you're a veteran, you know, have fun. Have fun with model building. That is the utmost thing with about model building. Enjoy it. You know, if it turns into something that's not enjoyable, I'm not too sure if that's model building or any hobby. Hobbies should make us excited, not miserable. So that's my thing. Have fun. Enjoy it. Secondly, my tutorial here is not exhaustive. This is not a compendium of glues. There are tons of stuff out there, out in the market, and out in the greater model building universe. So what I'm sharing with you today is just a slice of what I use. And you know, again, like I said with my filler video, I might be using something different next year. You know, as model builders, we're always looking for new techniques that are either easier or maybe a little bit more realistic, or they just meet our goals and our expectations of what we want for our model kit. Okay, so what do we got? We have this is Testors liquid cement. It's a slow setting glue, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But I just want to that's what we got. Secondly, you want a fast setting liquid cement. This is Ambroid Pro Weld. So there's that. And then we have our CA glue, or crazy glue, what we call it in the States. And this is some interesting stuff. And then lastly, we have our 5-minute epoxy. I'm not going to talk too much about this or the CA glue. One reason is that this is pretty much for resin pieces, and again, this is a basic tutorial, and I think I would rather spend time talking about epoxy with working with resin in that category of model building, because I think a basic model builder, you might get a few pieces of resin in the new kits, but I think for the most part styrene is going to be the main topic. So we'll save this for a resin discussion later. And also with the CA glue or crazy glue, I'll talk a little bit about this because a lot of your new kits are coming with a photo etch fret. That's becoming standard, and there's a few things that I think I can share with you about that, because you're going to run into this more than you will with the resin if you're a new builder. So the staple material though is your slow and fast setting glues. Again, don't just read the label, go, oh, I need to have testers or this kind. There's a lot of different manufacturers, and they all pretty much do the same thing. Even this liquid stuff, you can get a generic bottle. I don't know what it's called. I know my hobby shop sells it, but it's the same stuff. So there it is. Okay, so those are the types. And I want to get into that later, but what I really want to get into is sort of the, how would I call it, just some of the little tips and tricks that are out there. Some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about, it's in the books, it's in the magazines, Fine Scale Modeler or Military Modeling or any of that stuff. So it's not new. I'm just passing along the information, which it's kind of like what it's all about. You know, we're sharing, exchanging ideas. So, alright, so let's speed up here. We've talked about gluing, no, not gluing, we're talking about gluing right now. But we're talking about, you've cut your pieces, you've sanded them, you've done some filling. So now you're ready to glue these pieces together. So the first part is read the manual. Try to follow along, especially nowadays with these newer kits. They are getting more complex. They are, like the AFE Club kit, there's a lot of complexity, not only in the writing of the instructions, but also in just the number of parts. Some of these basic kits, no, they're not basic anymore, that, you know, you got a kit that's got like 400 parts. You really need to study it, so I can't stress it enough to know it. Especially if my example is doing German half-tracks, the 251s, or any of the German half-tracks. I know there's a guy, QDC, he had a talk about that where he glued all the wheels to the chassis together, and the problem is with the German chassis system is that the wheel systems, they're not one wheel in consecutive order, but they're woven. So you have one section that's really narrow, and the next piece it's wide and they fit in. And so he glued them all in, and then he realized he couldn't stick the ones in between and they didn't fit. And so you gotta pop them off and stuff. So it becomes very stressful and annoying. So this is my letting you all know that this kind of dry fit things. Construction workers, you know, I used to do construction for a little bit, and you know, I always say measure twice, cut once. And I think in model building it's the same thing. So dry fit your pieces together. So that means just taking the piece and making sure it fits, making sure that's where you want it, and then from that point glue it in. Alright. My other situation is that you want a strong bond. When I used to build models when I was a kid, my friends would always be like, oh Russ, yeah, cool model, and they start touching it and playing with it and parts fall off. And not only was I a little annoyed with my friend who couldn't keep their fingers off my model, but I was a little frustrated that, like, yeah, why isn't the glue doing its job? And in a lot of cases, when as model builders, a lot of times it's us, not the kit. Not always, but a lot of times it's our own human humanness, our humanity, didn't work. And in that case, I didn't have a strong bond. Alright, so what does that mean exactly? What I've noticed in some of the kits is that where the surface area of the model, where you're putting the pieces together, you don't have a nice even surface. Sometimes there's a lot of bumps and things. And a prime example would be Dragon has their figure line, and they're pretty notorious, I've noticed, especially with the German figures. I build a lot of German figures, and along where the belt is, there's a lot of extra little bumps and things that I personally, they don't need to be there. Firstly, because it interferes with the gluing process, and then yeah, there it is. So how do we get around that? And what I do is I just I shave that stuff off. In fact, I try to create a flat surface so that that bonding spot is strong. So I drew a little picture here to help illustrate what I'm trying to talk about. So this would be an example of the circles here. When you're using their canteens and their equipment, and if you just put it straight on, you end up with this little area as your bond. It's very small. So what I'll do is I'll actually take the canteen or the gas mask canister or whatever, and I'll actually take my file and just cut the piece off. And in that case, my surface area, or my area where my bond is, it's a lot larger and it's stronger, and you're going to have a stronger bond in the long run, and less likely those pieces are going to snap off. Now that works with figure building, but again, model building and gluing, there's thousands of scenarios. I can't create all of them. It's a learning part of the journey. You're going to run into them, and you just do the best you can. And then you got the other spectrum. What if you got these really tiny pieces? What are you supposed to do? If it's a tiny piece, there's really not much you can do to guarantee a safe journey for that little piece, other than watching it 24 hours a day. Things fall off. Models get old, things happen. What you can do, though, is I know in Fine Skill magazine, what they talk about sometimes is if you got a really tiny piece and you're trying to work with your tweezers, and you're trying to get it in there, and you're save yourself the stress. Leave a piece of the sprue on, because that sprue is a lot thicker. You can actually hold it with your fingers, and just set it in. Let that bond dry up overnight, nice and hard, and then the next day you can just clip off that piece of sprue and do your filing and sanding afterwards, and it's a lot easier to work with, and I can assure you that the chances of that thing flying off the table, workbench, is going to get reduced. Alright. What are other situations that you might run into with gluing? Overspills. You're gluing, and you got a blob of glue, more glue than you wanted. You got a flood of glue. Don't panic, don't freak out. Just take some paper towel. You can just tear off a little bit, and you can just wick it off. It'll just draw off. And I do it all the time, and it's no problem. And if it's really, you think it's really bad and really noticeable, you can just sand that excess glue off, and it's not going to be a big deal. Alright, overspills, strong bonds. Another piece I noticed too about strong bonds, another example back to figures, is what I read it in a book some time ago, was because also when my friends would be touching my figures, the appendages would come off. But what I've been doing now is I'll take my Dremel and a small drill bit, and I'll actually drill 1 or 2 holes inside the armpits and in the groin area, and that creates a glue well. I think that's what the author described it as, and it just creates a stronger bond, because when you put the glue on, it's just a little thin surface, but if you drill a little hole, and that creates that little well of glue, and you got more glue in there, and it's just a lot stronger, and hopefully they won't break off as easy. Glue can also be used as a filler, surprisingly. My stug, I have my Sturmgeschütz I did last winter. That's just a stock barrel, so it's split, and I had to glue it together, and that, came out pretty good. Don't see any seams or anything. And all you do is just glue it and leave a bead, as if you're doing like working with a caulking gun. Just leave a bead of glue, slow glue, not this, because this will just go right into the recesses. But the slow glue will just sit on top. It'll shrink a little bit, but it'll still leave a nice bump. And then once it's all dry, just go back and sand it down. And so it does a pretty good job of filling. Do I prefer using an aluminum turn barrel? Sure. But I also don't have a problem using stock stuff from the kit. If it works, sometimes they don't, especially if I'm working on an M1A1 Abrams tank. So it's modern, which is kind of cool for me. I don't do a lot of that, but Storm 22, you and Norm Lajoie, you're just inspiring me to get into modern stuff. So what I noticed though is that barrel is split. It's a stock barrel, and it's got a lot of grooves and stuff. It's not a smooth barrel, and so I'm thinking, just forget it, because that makes it even harder. The more nooks and crannies, that's hard to sand and fill, and sometimes I'm not sure if it's worth the effort. Alright, so I talked about that as a filler. Let's go into clamping. You're going to find yourself clamping a lot. The most common and effective clamp, at least short term, is your fingers. Especially if you're using the a quick drying glue, just use your fingers. A few seconds, maybe a minute, and you can set it, and it'll be all done. But that's just for small things. Mostly we have our standard clamps, and the ones I like the best are these clamps. They got a nice rubber cushion thing, and they got a lock. They're not going to go anywhere. And these work pretty good. And the only thing I have with with the clamps though is don't clamp too hard. Know the amount of pressure. Cause you really don't want to ratchet it down, because then what you're doing is especially if you're working on chassis, you're going to put a depression, and that might set, and it may not bounce back up. So keep that in mind. Rubber bands also are good clamp system, especially airplanes. I know when I was a kid I used to use these all the time, and people still do them. My only thing is know the elasticity, because if it's really tight, again, it's gonna push it hard and really smush it in. So you just want one that's just got enough pressure, and the best way if you can just double wrap it, you can kind of control how much pressure you're bringing back in. So these work pretty good. Alright, so we talked about clamps and overspilling and dry fitting and having fun. So let's kind of go into the glue itself. Slow setting glue. I'm not a big fan of this. Right now it's just what's available. And my issue isn't so much with the glue. I like the glue, it works, it does the job, but I don't like their method of this needle concept. What I've noticed is that when I do my shake, it creates an air bubble inside, and that air bubble wants to come out. So I usually have some Montezuma volcano glue just spilling out, and what's happening is I'm losing glue, so I'm not getting the bang for my buck out of this thing. What I do like is the Umbro. I know the model builders in our community overseas, they have that Umbro glue that has that needle, and looks pretty cool. I would love to try it out, but Umbro products, at least in my part of the United States, they only sell the paints and not all the other stuff. I would love to try some of the other products that they have. Alright, and it's a slow setting glue, so what's the advantage to that? Well, the advantage is that it's not going to dry instantly like the liquid cement. This will set slowly, so it gives you an opportunity to manipulate that piece. Alright, the window of opportunity to manipulate is short, maybe a minute. Depends. If you put a lot of glue, it's going to move, because the more liquid, that means chemically it's going to take longer for those atoms to do their trick. But we're not building a cathedral with this stuff, so our models are small, so we're usually using little bits of it, so it's going to dry pretty quick, but you do have an opportunity to do some movement with it. That's what I like about it, especially when I'm doing indie track links. It works great, because that track, it's not going to set quickly, and so I have time to wrap that track and get all the links hooked up, and then wrap it on my chassis system, and it's ready to go. And I could put in that sag if I need to. So this is good stuff. This is like the main glue I use for almost all my models and for all the situations that I come in with. So there's that. And secondly, the liquid glue. This stuff is awesome. I love it, because in a lot of the gluing that we do, a lot of the basic stuff, it's quick. This works great with joints that are like hairline, because this uses capillary action, which is the glue is going to go naturally into the crevices and grooves. Like once you put it on, it just like disappears and goes right into the seam. It leaves almost no visible evidence of the glue. Sometimes it does if you put a lot on, but for the most part it just wicks right into that seam. And also, because it goes right into that seam, it's actually melting. You can see it melting the plastic, and it kind of works as a filler. I know Dr. Cranky, I don't know how many cranky heads watch on my channel, but I do watch them. He's a bit of an eccentric model builder. He makes me laugh, and but he's an amazing painter. He does some extreme things with cars and things. But he uses this as a filler, actually. He'll take bits of styrene, all the scraps of styrene, he'll dump it in here, like the white stuff, and he creates his own filler. And it's great because it has a brush you can apply it on. So, like, that's pretty cool. I want to try it sometime. So, there's that. And this stuff, though, once it's on, it's on. There's no room, no margin of error. So if you make sure you know what you want to do right at that moment, because you're gonna have to break it off, which isn't a big deal. It happens. It just means more work. Kind of have to take a few steps backwards and start over again. But it comes with the package of model building. All right, CA glue. This is I use the Crazy Glue. This is just your generic stuff you can get any like a drugstore, like Walgreens or CVS, school supplies. I like it because it has the brush, which I think is a great way of applying it, especially for photo etch. This is pretty much what you're going to be using, how you bond the photo etch material using this kind of glue. Don't even think of this. Don't use this on photo etch. Or even sometimes this won't work either, but it's photo etch is CA glue material. And this stuff doesn't take a lot. It doesn't take a lot at all, just a little bit. And that's why I like the brush, because I can just kind of put on a little bit. And if I have to wick it off, I can wick it off. Working with CA glue, though, you got to work fast. So before you put that glue on that piece, go through your mind, read your instructions, and kind of go through it, do a little rehearsal, the choreography of how you're going to get that piece on. Because once it sets, which is almost instantaneously, it's on. And photo etch, if you've seen those frets, they're small. and you can't just go pulling it off. You've pretty much ruined the piece, I think. Unless it's a big piece. My Sturmgeschütz here, this is all photo etch Zimmermann. And so there are a lot of pieces that my initial drop, it was cockeyed, and so I had to pull it off. You know, sometimes pulling off a band-aid is painful, but it's got to be done. And so I did. I pulled it off, sanded off the CA glue, and started over again. Not a big deal. But smaller pieces of photo etch, I've never had that situation, but I would imagine that you're going to really ruin all those folds and the bend. So photo etch is fragile stuff, and so I think I'll probably just make a special video just on photo etching someday down the road, because I think that's definitely you're starting to enter into more advanced modeling skills, which kind of goes beyond what I'm trying to do on this video. Okay. And then lastly, I'll just talk about the epoxy stuff. This is just it's kind of like milliput putty. It's a form of epoxy. This is liquid. It's a 5-minute setting. Same idea with the putty. It's equal parts. Make 2 balls, 2 beads, and take a stick, stir it, and apply it. And this works with your resin pieces. And I'll just leave it at that. My thing with this, it says 5 minutes. Yeah, I don't think it sets. Maybe little drabs of it, but I used my Cavalier makes Zimmermann for model kits, and it's resin Zimmermann. And when I was working on my Panther tank from Italy, slapping on the Zimmermann sheets, I noticed that it kind of slides. Because I set it, and then I had to go get a drink of water or something, and I came back and like the Zimmermann was going, what? So it's kind of like the Earth's mantle floating on lava. So you have to kind of like work with it a little bit. Which reminds me about the power of gravity. The more glue you put on your piece, it's going to move depending on whether gravity is working with you or against you. So that's just a word of caution. Just kind of don't go pouring the glue on, especially when you're doing things like antennas, because the antenna, you want it straight. If it's a straight antenna, some antennas are curved, but you know what I mean. It's going to start going like this. So use a little bit, and the most you can do is just use your hands to kind of hold it in. If you can kind of create a jig, that would be great. Some of the great sometimes I'll use these in extra hands, kind of make a good jig, because it has a nice hard base, and you can just like have the clamp holding it, and you can walk away. And that works pretty good. These are great because you can hold it if you're doing fragile pieces. Excuse me. You can have it holding it, and you can kind of come in and drop your piece in. And also, because it's got these extendable hands, especially if gravity is something you're concerned about, you can have it so that gravity is working with you, and that is fun. Okay. So I hope I haven't lost you. I know it's kind of like all over the place. I tried to outline what I was going to say, but I think this is such a huge topic, and to condense it in the video is just, it could be a bit much. This might be a long video, which for some of you, I know you guys prefer that I talk more, which I'm trying to do. I just noticed that the longer my videos get, sometimes I feel like I'm just getting lost in it. So my last comments are on my Sturmgeschütz, especially when you're working with the big bulk pieces of your model, whether that be a ship or a tank. Sometimes you want to use a weight to hold your thing together. In this case, my Sturmgeschütz, the upper hull, it was actually several pieces. It's not one piece. Like, Tamiya kits, that's great. It's like usually their hulls are one single piece, which is nice. But the Dragon one, it was several pieces, and so it wiggled a lot. I had a lot of shifting. And when I first did the dry fitting, the whole thing just kind of like went up like that, up again, away from the hull. So I'm like, oh my god, this is going to be a gluing nightmare. So how did I do it? How did I keep it all together? Well, I realized you can't, when you got a very noticeable, it's not flush. There's a few things you can do. You can fill it with shims of styrene, that's one way, and then fill it with putty to smooth out the surface. Or if it's got flecks, like this had some flecks, I could actually bring it down. So what I did is I started gluing in the bow, and I clamped it, and I left it dry overnight. The next day I took a clamp and I clamped the back, but I only glued the midsection. Let it dry overnight. And so by the third day, the gap was, it was still going up like that, and I took my glue, glued it, and I took a book. Sometimes books work, and I just laid it on overnight, and the next day I was all set. It was all bonded and had a good strong bond. I really poured a lot of glue on the inside to glue it on, and no problems at all. So counterweights or weights work pretty good in books. I'm always a big fan of home material. If you can find resources and things that help you with your model building around home, they work. In this case, books are good. Just don't use a big book. A big book might just crush the model. So there it is. Well, I don't got anything else really to say about this stuff. I was going to think about doing a video showing examples of live gluing situations, but I'm probably not going to do that, just because there's just way too many situations, and I think talking about some of the stuff we went over is a good amount. One of the things about these tutorials is you don't want to overwhelm people. That can be counterproductive. This is for the basic model builder, and you're going to learn stuff on your own, and life experience or just empirical experience in and of itself, you're going to learn tons of stuff, and that's probably a little bit more powerful than listening to me go on and on and on. Alright, so good luck with your gluing. Had questions and comments? That makes this video even more interesting, because I'm sure we're going to learn more stuff, and I get to talk about other things, because I'm sure I've missed tons of stuff. So I wish you the best in your modeling adventures, and model on, and don't get hung up. If you've got a problem, ask. Go to ISM, International Scale Modeler. There are huge amounts of model building wisdom from all sorts of people all around the world who are more than happy to share and talk about whatever questions you have. And if they don't know, they're going to find somebody who will know, and hopefully they'll get to you soon. So until I see you again, have fun. Alright, this is Russ Gosselin signing out, and have a good day.